Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. My name's Nigel Canning, UK Sales Engineer for the South. Today, what we want to do is basically give you a simple sort of live demo of two of the Nebula and Nebula Flex type switches. So I'll wait a minute, just another minute if you don't mind. There's a few more people that are starting to join. But the gist of it is just to show you how simple it is to add a switch to Nebula, and to manage it and to look at the status of ports and so on and so forth. But just a basic, simple introduction of how straightforward Nebula is in these strange times. So I hope everyone's well. Yeah, the numbers are going up on the attendees, so if you can, just bear with me and I'll get going. Actually, what I might do is, I can't easily answer questions until the end, but if anybody has got any questions, then please raise them via the GoToWebinar question thing, and I'll get back to you later on. Thank you. Right, let's get going. So first of all, what I want to do is just show you the two switches that we're using today. So basically, I've got a picture in a minute, an actual real picture, and I've got a webcam, which I'm hoping will work so that I can just show you and prove that the equipment is what it is. So I've got what's called a pure Nebula switch, an NSW 200. So that's basically, it can only be managed via Nebula. And this particular switch has got 10 gig trunk ports on it, 375 watt PoE budget, really nice Nebula switch, ideal. The other switch that I've got is, oh, actually, let me just go back a minute, sorry about that. To make things possible within a half an hour webinar, what I've done is I have added the NSW switch to my Nebula portal account already. The second switch, which is just coming up, which is this XGS 1930, this is a Nebula Flex switch. I genuinely haven't added this to my Nebula account. And what I was going to do is literally show you how to add a Nebula Flex switch to the portal and then manage it and so on and so forth. But when you first add a switch to the portal, it can take 2 or 3 minutes for it to come up and so on and so forth. So rather than just sit there like an idiot for 3 minutes, I've got another switch, a different switch online. So that's why I've got one switch that's within the portal and one switch that's not in the portal. And this XGS 1930 switch is a Nebula Flex switch, which basically means it can be managed by Nebula or it can be managed standalone. Once again, this one's got 10 gig trunk ports, fairly quiet fan design. The fans that you perhaps can hear are the fans from the NSW switch, which is a little bit more loud. Similar PoE rating, so on and so forth. This drawing is just showing you that it can be, with Nebula Flex, it can be managed by Nebula or it can be managed standalone. Why do we call it a hybrid switch? Basically, we're giving you the choice to either carry on deploying switches standalone, or obviously the way forward for managed service providers is obviously to manage it from the cloud. So this is just future-proofing it basically. And this is what the switch looks like. So what we'll do is, this is a list of the live equipment. I've got a picture in the next slide, and then I'll use the webcam and the web interface to show you what I'm going to do. So basically, I've got a Sizewell 4G router, so it's a bit like your broadband router at home, but it's got internet connectivity via 4G. Each of the switches connects to one of the ports on the 4G router. So it's pretending to be, obviously because I'm at home, this is an office somewhere, or a hotel, a bar, or whatever. So the pure Nebula switch is the NSW 228 port. I mentioned before what it is. It's a 24 port switch, 375 watts of PoE power, and 14 gig uplinks. And it includes a professional licensing pack in the feature set rather. The Nebula Flex switch is the XGS 1930. Once again, 28 ports, PoE, 10 gig trunks, 375 watts, but that's a hybrid mode as well. So this is genuinely what the kit looks like. I'm going to point the webcam in it at the moment, and I hope it works. So I apologize that I am definitely no YouTube influencer. I am at home, and hopefully this is going to work. So, right, so bear with me a second because I need to stop the PowerPoint and just dive into the webcam. So let me just check that this works. Here we go. So this is my webcam. Hopefully, there you go. There you go. How exciting, not. So it actually is live. The bottom switch, the switch that I've already, already configured, is on. I don't know if you can see the lights are on there. The 1930 switch is not powered on. And obviously the 4G router is on. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you on the boxes. I don't know if you see that there's serial numbers and Ethernet MAC addresses, and you need those items for the actual registration of a device. Now, the serial numbers for this switch are actually on the bottom, so I've got a picture of it. So I'm going to just go back to the presentation. So bear with me a second. I swap this out and just go back to the. So this is my Nebula account. So I'm just going to bear with me a second. I'm going to log out. So this is the Nebula portal. It's nebula.zeisel.com, and I'm just going to log in so you can see exactly what I'm doing. So I'm just logging in with my account. Nothing fancy, and you can do this yourself on the demo account if people want to have a play. There we go. I need to choose my professional pack subscription. Oh, one, sorry, my Zeisel UK sales one, sorry. So this is the current new Nebula Control Center GUI. So you've got an organizational view, site view, each individual device. So it can be a security gateway or a switch or an access point. But what this site-wide dashboard is showing you is an overview, a simple overview. And you can see here where it says switch status that one switch is currently active. So if I click on it, lo and behold, there's the NSW 200 switch, which I can manage. So I just click on it. All I'm doing is clicking on it. I'm not doing anything fancy. Now, one of the weird things is I'm using, as I said, a 4G device, and it's a Vodafone SIM. So obviously the actual internet breakout is somewhere in London, but it looks like it's somewhere not far from Westminster in the Thames, but obviously it's not. But anyway, so you can see the basic configuration of the device. You can see that the management IP which is on a local private subnet, but you'll see that the public IP is obviously some kind of Vodafone internet IP. So this device is up and running. And now if I go over to where it says switch, the GUI basically is split into two parts. So I can look at the monitor, so the sort of configuration and the events and so on and so forth, or I can look at the configuration of the switch. So if we go and look at switches and start drilling down again, and look at the ports. Now I've got port 1 connects to the LTE router, so that's my outbound internet connection so that the device can be managed. Port 2, I've just got a Raspberry Pi plugged into it, just so I've got another device that gives us an active link. So what I can do is you can just click on the port, the stats come up, and you'll see, there you go, it's still on the PVID1, so it's on the basic management VLAN. It's a Raspberry Pi, so I don't know if you can see that the actual status of the port is 100 meg copper. And you can see here a graph of the data that was used. I've only switched it on in the last half an hour or so. And I did Raspberry Pi Linux updates just to generate a bit of traffic. and you can see the stats and so on and so forth. So it's very easy to just see what's going on with the particular port. To look at the configuration, you can just go to the configure section, touch the switch ports, wait a little while, and then all the ports come up. You can also see, obviously, that ports are currently live at the moment. Like, say, for instance, this port 2 that I talked about has just got the Raspberry Pi on it. The orange is just indicating it's a 100 meg port rather than a gig port. So port 1, which is the uplink, you can see that there. That's gigabit Ethernet. So I'll leave that for a minute, and then what I want to do is just show you how to configure and add a new device. So I've got the device's serial number and MAC address on a little notepad file over there, so I'm just going to bring them over when I need to. But if you go to the site-wide configuration, you'll see that there's general settings, alert settings, and add devices, and it's add devices is what we want. And what we want to do is we want to register a device. So the sequence of events are that you register the device within Nebula, and this is essentially a manual way of doing it. You can do it via an app and a QR code, which is even easier, but this way works very simply from a demonstration point of view. So if I register this device, click register, it asks me for the MAC address. So I'll copy the MAC address, and also wants the serial number. Copy the serial number, and then I didn't type in the model. It worked out. So the Nebula portal now starts to know about this. Okay, so it knows it's an XGS 1930 28 HP, and I'm just going to click OK. See what happens. Okay. Now what I need to do in a minute is actually switch the device on because it's not actually registered. Here we go. I don't think it took that one properly. Bear me a second. I should have refreshed that, so I'll just put the details in again. Russian. There we go. So it knows that the device has already been registered. So that last one did go through. So now I basically need to power it up. So if you can bear with me a second, I'm just going to take my headset off and plug it in. Right, so it's plugged in. I'll just, give me a second. So I've just powered it up, and if you can see, there's a single green light comes on. And I'm not going to stay here for long, but you'll see that the system light starts to flash. All the LEDs are coming on. Okay, this is rubbish focus. Sorry about that. But there's a cloud light. There's a cloud LED, which is the third LED down on the display. Does that work? It's starting to work. When the cloud LED starts flashing, it's starting to talk to Nebula. When the cloud LED gets green solid, basically it's talked to Nebula, the registration has worked and it's completely hooked up. And now that does take a little while. Oh, here we go. Can you see the cloud is starting to go orange and flashing? Yeah. So I wish I had a tripod, everyone, but I'm just holding the webcam. There you go. So it's starting to flash away. In a minute, hopefully it should appear in the inventory for that site. There we go. I wonder if I can leave this down. Aim it up. So Typical cables in the way, isn't it? Sorry about this. Yeah, so I can just go back to the camera in a minute, and at least it's stable there. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll leave that out of the way and go back to the GUI. So what you will be able to do is you get a site-wide dashboard, and then eventually, see where it says switch status 2, we should start to see the switch come online. Yeah, and it's not quite there yet. You can look at the organization. What you can do is you can have a look at the inventory of an organization. Yeah, so there we go. There's the inventory. So the XGS 193028 HP, which I've just registered, and you can see that it was registered at 1312, obviously, so that's UTC GMT basically. So when it's properly online, we'll be able to manage it and configure it. So I'll go back to the NSW 200 switch and then show you what you can do on that. Oops. There we go. So what you can do, obviously, you can get the switch ports up. You can either, for instance, select groups of switches, go in and take them out, and then edit an entire range of switches, or you can start editing and playing on an individual port basis. But the GUI shows you, obviously, port name, the details of it, where it's configured. A second. Got the other switch there. So there you can see it's not up to date yet, the new one that's been added. So I'll let that carry on. We'll go back to the NS200. Just be patient for it to come up. Configure the ports. That's better. Sorry, got the right switch now. So for instance, if you want to configure port 3, I'm touching port 3, you can just touch it. Obviously, you can see what the switch name is and its port, and then you can change the port. So if I'm going to put, demo port 3, do you want the port to be enabled straight away? Do you want to enable the rapid spanning tree? Well, I don't on this one. Do I want the logical link discovery protocol enabled? Might as well. Do I want PoE enabled? We can do PoE schedules, which I'll show you in a minute. Obviously, things like loop guard, storm control you can configure. The type of port, so is it a trunk port, linking switches or routers and gateways and security devices, or is it an access port? Well, in this case, we'll just have it as an access port. And let's connect it to a new Vlan called 99. You can do all kinds of things with security. So you can have a radius policy, a security policy that's accessed via it. You can do things like port isolation, so level 2 isolation, which will switch on if you want a Wi-Fi solution and don't want to completely isolate customers. The little diamond, I don't know if you can see the little blue diamond, but basically that means that this feature is a Nebula Professional licensing feature. Now I've got Nebula Professional licensing applied to this because my account's got 1 year's worth of professional licensing applied. So this feature here, bandwidth control, which is clearly quite useful for an individual port, you can enable it, and then you can control the ingress and the egress traffic from the switch. So the switch will do that on a per port basis. And you can also use it, you can also use an IPTV multicast feature. Once again, that's a professional licensing feature. So if I update that switch port, there you go. So change has gone through, and lo and behold, where was it? It was, and I can enable additional views. So what did I do? Where's the VLAN count gone? There we go, port 3. Oh no, it's gone back. Sorry, it's gone back to the other switch, isn't it? Sorry. I should have done that. Let me go back to this switch. I think that means that the other switch has now started to come online. Yes, it's gone green. So I don't know if you saw that, but the XGS 1930 is now live and can be managed, and it interfered. Go back and do that configuration. There we go. There you go. So there's my port 3. I'll scroll along. That's why I couldn't see the VLANs. There's what. Yeah. On that. So it's kept those features. Yeah, there's my port 99. Yeah, so that's fine. Sorry. So that's fine. Obviously, if you want to change whole groups of ports, let's go back to that other switch again. So that's a bit. Oh, it's because it's sorry, because it's. I'm not explaining that very well. So because the other switch is now online, typical classic, you can see that all of these switch ports that are within this site. So there are now 2 switches that can be managed. Yes. So if I show all of the ports on one page, you can see what's actually happened. So this switch with the MAC address is the XGS 1930, and this is the NSW switch. It's because that XGS switch has now come online. So the best thing to do is to go back to that XGS, tidy it up a little bit. So this is the switch that I literally have just plugged in, done nothing to it. I'll give it a small bit of configuration, so I'll just give it a name. Just give it the name XGS 1930 28 HP demo. I'll just say that now, make it clearer on the switch display port. There we go. So if we configure port now, that's because the name's matching. There we go. There you go. That's because the previous search was for the MAC address, and now we've given it a name. Sorry about that. That's the risk of doing it live. So you can see that all of the switch ports now are configurable from within the GUI. And perhaps that's one thing to sort of highlight, in that in a standalone mode, you're used to a slightly finer grain of configuration. So your web interfacing or your CLIing into an individual switch and working on it on an individual basis. Within the web GUI, once they're in a manageable state, you can configure all the ports and change them, their basic configuration, every single port with one go, which is obviously quite efficient, but at the same time could potentially be quite dangerous. So you need to be aware of that the configuration is abstracted. These are 2 different switches. They're not that dissimilar, but they are different switches, yet their management interface is essentially the same. So for instance, if I go and pick a port on this newly configured XGS 1930 switch, the GUI is essentially, well, it's exactly the same as the previous switch, the NSW 200 switch. You can see its port ID up there. So it is quite important to realize that the abstraction of the GUI, the abstraction of the configuration, is via the Nebula GUI. There you go. Obviously, the kind of things you can do is you can specify access control lists, you can switch on multicast. One of the things I mentioned earlier on is you can specify, for instance, a PoE schedule. So if I add a schedule on here using a template, which is just say the working week, so that's available 8 to 5 daily, and I just give it a name, PoE work, say schedule 1. So this would be, a classic thing for maybe switch the access points on during the working week, assuming that you work at 8 and finish at 4:30. So I add that PoE schedule, and now there's a schedule available called PoE work schedule. If you go back to a switch and you go back to the switch ports, I forgot to save. Slow down, Nigel. So if we go and pick a port, let's go and say pick port 3 on this newly configured switch, the XGS 1930. Turn off features we don't want, so we don't want rapid spanning tree. Let's just say we're not worried about LLDP. We turn it off there. But if you look at the PoE schedule, now you can enable a PoE schedule over here. Stick port isolation on as well. The other features we're not bothered about, for instance, and then update it. So an access point, for instance, that's connected to port 3, that access point would only be powered on with that PoE schedule. So if I enable the PoE schedule option on here. Oh yeah, there we go. Oh great, my GUI's frozen. Sorry, bear with me. No, I think this GUI, because I've got a webcam and things like that, and then the web goes to webinar stopping me do that. But I just wanted to highlight the schedule so I could see it individually. So there's all kinds of things that that normally you would do on an individual port or an individual switch basis that now you can configure on a group basis, a group switch port basis. So if you want to do multicast IGMP in the audiovisual world, you've got an entire configuration screen to deal with all of that. You can deal with the topology. You can see what channels are being viewed once it's all set up, a whole host of features. You can set up, I won't be able to do it because I haven't got a radius server to hand, but you can set up a radius server and you can set up an authentication policy against that radius server. So you can have people secured using their MAC address or other kind of username authentication mechanisms. As I just said and shown, there's a PoE schedule that you can apply to switch ports. And there's a whole series of general switch settings. One of the classic things that you do tend to want to change is the management VLAN that the device is connected on. Obviously, on the whole, most people will leave it at the default VLAN 1. If you want to change the VLAN, you can change the VLAN number up there for the management VLAN, but you must make sure that that new VLAN does actually have outbound internet access as well. And Nebula does some safety checks on that. So if when you specify an additional VLAN, it doesn't find outbound internet access to Nebula, it will revert that change out for safety. So the spanning tree protocol configuration section is on this page. If you want to add quality of service to particular ports, you can do that. As it says here, you can specify priorities on individual VLANs at this level on the screen. If you want to do port mirroring, so if you want to break a port out for debugging and stuff like that, you can do that here. Then there's also useful things that have been added recently, voice VLAN. So that's a classic thing now for voice over IP phones. You can specify a voice VLAN, you can specify its priority, and you can plug in the what's called the organizationally unique identifier into here, which this basically is the MAC address of your voice over IP phone provider. So you put that in here, add it to the network, and what that means is that any voice over IP phones that power up with that Ethernet MAC address will be connected to this voice specific VLAN. So you don't have to go through configuring a whole load of things. You just put the OUI in. If you've got multiple phones, obviously add a couple of them. And that means it's very simple and straightforward to create a voice over IP VLAN and solution for your customers. You can also do that, I'll turn it off on that one. You can also do a similar thing for a vendor ID based VLAN. So if you want to connect Dell laptops or some other consistent vendor device to a VLAN, you can do a similar thing here. So once again, you enter the MAC address, specify the VLAN, you can specify the priority and obviously give it a user-friendly description, and you can do that. The access management is all to do with the security of the devices, the actual switch devices themselves. So that is putting in a simple access control list to control access to the switches themselves. And this is basically the management VLAN control, which is, as it says here, it basically it keeps the Nebula Control Center link working. You just have to be careful about what you do in relation to securing the devices from a management point of view. I'm just going to cancel that one for safety. Obviously, from a management point of view, with these kind of GUIs, you can see, for instance, now that the PoE consumption is the total of both the switches. So you've got 750 watts now, whereas in fact, obviously it's broken out over 2 devices. You've got the peak power consumption that you can monitor. Obviously, I've not got any PoE devices available that I can plug into these switches, but they will be shown and monitored on here. There's an IPTV report. So this is to do with hospitality or any AV solution. So if you've got a source of multicast AV traffic, so it would be like a satellite TV head end in a hotel, and the multicast group addresses essentially map to a television channel. You can configure that in this report. I can't show you it because I've got no IPTV multicast facilities. But one of the nice things is that that report, which is a professional licensing feature, shows you the channel usage. So it's quite useful within, say, hospitality. If you're only using a certain number of channels, you can go back to your channel provider, say Sky or somebody like that, and reduce your channels, which is quite a cost-effective thing. You can look at the clients that are connected. I've only got one Raspberry Pi, which maybe probably doesn't show up actually, because it's not authenticated. It's just on the network. See what it finds. There you go. So on the NS, it shows you the switch that it's connected to. It shows you the port, and it's got a description. Well, it's actually this is actually the Raspberry Pi. So if I click on it, it'd be interesting to see what it knows about it. There you go. Yeah, a minute. There you go. So it knows that that Ethernet MAC address, the B827EB part of it, that's the OUI that we were talking about earlier on. And you can see that that is registered to the Raspberry Pi Foundation. So it's gone and looked that up and it knows about it. Let it refresh. Some other things that's useful to show with Nebula in general. If you go to the site-wide, you can see there's a firmware management section. So I'll click on firmware management. Now, these switches are now in the green status, so they're up to date. Now, that happened for the XGS 1930 automatically. I didn't do anything about that. All I did was, as I said, is register it within the portal, switch it on, and I haven't done anything. I hadn't frigged it in advance. I thought I'd take a chance and risk it. Luckily, it came off. But what you can do is if you go and look in the event log of that switch, I'll let it refresh the data. You may well find that it pushed a firmware upgrade through if it was required. Nearly there. There's probably quite a bit of data to pull back. And also it's pulling it back, forgive me, over a 4G internet connection in my lounge. This is probably going to take longer. There's quite a lot of log information in there. Sorry about that. Or we could try and get it the other way around. There we go. So that's a simpler way of viewing the event log. You can filter it on a switch. You can see all the filtering, so the switch name, keywords, priority, anything, times and so on and so forth. So this will almost certainly be UTC, so it might be a little bit confusing. You can see that it saved the configuration. I'll show it all. There we go. Okay, so there you go. So that looks like it put a firmware upgrade through at that point there. Yeah. So that was automatically upgraded the firmware. So what I'm trying to say, perhaps in this instance badly, is that firmware management is very straightforward to do for any Nebula device. It's not just switches. So this one, there's only 2 switches within this organization and site. But if you have access points, switches, and security gateways, you can create upgrade schedules if you like, and then you schedule the particular group of devices separately when you want them. So they can either follow an upgrade schedule, I don't know if you can see that, but basically you can select a device and change and configure an upgrade schedule. So perhaps you do the access points first, then you do the switches next, and then finally you do the security gateway, because obviously if you go and do the security gateway firmware upgrade, when it reboots, all of the other devices will essentially be offline for a little while externally. So there's a huge range of features within Nebula, which obviously within less than half an hour, it's a bit difficult to show. The organizational wide side of things can show you sites, the inventory of devices, your license management, which is all to do with professional licensing, the number of administrators, all kinds of things, and higher value features like configuration management and template. That's all to do with cloning sites, cloning switches, so on and so forth. Those sort of things probably we do on another day on another webinar. So I'm aware that it's just gone 36 minutes rather. So I'll probably just go back to the webinar. So if anybody's got any questions, so now's the time to do it. Did want to mention that if anybody is interested in the managed services side of things with Nebula, please go to the MSP Evolve website, which is msp.cytel.com. You'll get sent copies of the slides. Thank you very much indeed. I'll stay on the line if anyone's got any questions, or if people want me to go back to a specific part of the GUI, quite happy to do that. Sorry, it was slightly sort of homebrew, but I am at home with a webcam, and stay safe and well, everybody. And as I said, I'll stay on the line if there's any questions, or if you want me to go to a specific part of the GUI, quite happy to do that. And thank you very much for your time. Take care. I'll just break out the questions actually. Oh yes, there's quite a few questions. Bear with me a second. I will. Let me have a look. Okay, there's a couple of questions. It will take me a little while to type them all in. Yeah, there's various people, and Colin, I quite agree with you. Doing the actual registration of the device via the app is even more straightforward. Using the QR code, obviously once you've logged in the app to the appropriate site, it's just that it's actually quite difficult to do that from a demonstration, but I do quite agree, Colin. So gentleman Gary has asked about, actually what I could do is, let me get the GUI back. I'll go back to the topology. One of the things that you can see, let me just go back to the topology. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a topology option. Oh, it hasn't shown that on that. Where's it gone? Let's see if I can get a topology view up. It should be showing them. I don't know if I've accidentally switched off LLDP that helps create the topology dynamically. No, I'll leave that for a minute and go back to the questions. me just get the questions up. Yes, so one of the things I probably should have highlighted better is creating VLANs is slightly different to what we're used to in terms of CLI and a web GUI. So when you configure a port and you want to connect it to a particular VLAN, that's the point essentially at which the VLAN is created, and obviously it's a port-based VLAN pvid. So I think Ian mentioned that. So yes, it's not a separate operation, if you like. So you don't go in to, say, a VLAN configuration screen, create all the VLANs you want, and then connect the ports to it. It's done the other way around. The abstraction is within the port. Obviously, if you've got, say, 10 ports, as I said on the GUI, you can go and select all those 10 ports and configure all of those 10 ports to be on the VLAN and all of their other common configuration items. Somebody's also questioned, I assume all switches need internet access to work, or can it act as the proxy for the others? No, all switches need to have essentially a management VLAN connection which has outbound internet access enabled. And obviously no firewall rules in place that block access to our management platform, our Nebula platform. Nebula platform itself is running on redundant zones within Amazon Web Services. And there are a series of IP addresses that you need to enable outbound access to, which is, you can see it on the support forums that specify there's about 4 IP addresses if you've got firewall settings blocking outbound internet access. So Ian's raised a question about on-premises from I'll answer that one directly via an email. All right, so yes, Colin, you can have two-factor authentication on the Nebula Control Central portal login. You can also delegate administration to different people, to different organizations. You don't have to have an account that everybody can have access to. You have multiple accounts. To have more than 5 administrators, you need to have, on an organization, you need to have the professional licensing applied. The free license limits you to 5 administrators. But yes, multiple users in the company can be assigned to individual organizations. So somebody's asked, why are switch ports all trunk by default on the demo unit rather than access by default? I guess it's just the way the GUI people chose to do it. Obviously, you can just select all those ports, go in instantly, knock off the management or trunk ports, and then change them to access ports anyway. You can do it all within the web GUI anyway, so not too difficult. Yes, you can. Somebody's mentioned about, do you have to see all the ports? No, you can filter based on the switch name and so on and so forth. It's just because obviously I crudely went in and let the newly registered switch come up in front of me, which I guess in hindsight was a bit risky. So there you go. I think that's answered most of the questions. If I haven't answered anything, my email address is nigel.canning@xizor.co.uk. I think it might actually be on, it's on the, where is it? You can see my name there, so nigel.canning@xizor.co.uk. If there's any questions or any help in Nebula or MSP that you'd like, then just come back to me. So I'll wrap it up now. Thank you very much for all the people that have stayed on. If I have missed a question, I do apologize. Just get back to me and have a good day and stay safe. Thank you very much, everybody.